Before all the votes in the 2020 election were even counted, President Trump sent his attorneys to court alleging voter fraud. It didn't work in court, but experts warn that this narrative of a conspiracy against the president is laying the groundwork for voter suppression across the country for years to come.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
The claims are so large that I think they end up not discrediting themselves, but legitimizing the notion that there must be some fraud.
There's lots of evidence that American elections are already secure, but politicians are already proposing measures to make it harder to vote in the name of ballot security.
The temperature is simply very high over race,
Black boys matter!
over immigration,
No one is illegal! Unsold land!
over the precarious state of the economy,
No landlords, no cops! All evictions gotta stop!
and over the pandemic. And I think when the social temperature is that high, people often reach for easy explanations such as fraud, and then also reach for easy solutions such as build more barriers to the ballot box.
This isn't the first time the country has seen something like this.
The passage of one of the very first modern voter ID laws in Indiana was accompanied by claims about the need to prevent fraud, even though they acknowledged, they stipulated in the legal papers that there was no known case of in-person voter impersonation fraud in Indiana in the previous 50 years. But it was to prevent fraud that they passed this law that kept some legitimate voters from voting. That pattern goes way back to the 19th century. African Americans in the South were enfranchised for the first time, and they voted and they wielded political power. And that was very much resented by many Southern whites.
Then in the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act enfranchised hundreds of thousands of black voters, triggering what Kesar told me was another key era of voter suppression, the one we're in right now. Election laws and gerrymandering have made it harder for certain Americans to express their political views, particularly voters of color. And it's not slowing down anytime soon.
Once again, there is this widespread concern that there is a they, an other, that is taking over. Whether sincere or not, the belief that these other voters are committing fraud is not a distant leap for a lot of people. People are preparing now to deflect what many in the voting reform community expect will be a new series of attempts to suppress the vote by passing new and more restrictive laws, by creating new obstacles to the polls, for example, around mail-in voting.
Are those the kind of voter suppressive efforts you could expect to see going forward?
Those are ones that I absolutely expect to see. I certainly expect to see that there will be more procedural restrictions on mail-in voting. At least there will be attempts to do this in various states.
In Georgia, lawmakers recently announced plans to try and pass legislation that would limit mail voting, remove drop boxes, and add a voter ID requirement to those who can still vote by mail. All hurdles that will just make it a little harder to cast a ballot.
Voter ID laws can always be stretched, and I'm sure that there are people out there whose imaginations are more fertile than mine who will come up with new and different ways of putting obstacles in the way of people trying to get to the polls.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.